Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
Yes, indeed. Welcome on in, everybody, to the Check Your Brain podcast here on, well, wherever you're listening to this, whether it's on Patreon, where I'm going to put it up over the weekend, or if you're listening for the free podcast at Patreon or at wherever you get your podcasts, you can go to patreon.com/Tony Mazur to get this, all of this going on that I have. All my nonsense that I usually have on Patreon, and it goes up there. I post about 4 podcasts a week, but then I also post my guests, and this guest here is a special guest. We're talking about the movies today, and that's Nick Tabor. He is one of the hosts of the it's honestly, it's a really cool podcast because it's something that I've always really liked. I like movie buffs, and I like talking to movie buffs and some obscure stuff. And it's called the Movie Theater Time Machine Podcast. And Nick, thanks for coming on. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, thank you, Tony, for having me. This is awesome, dude.
Yeah, so first of all, tell us about the podcast, because I want to get into talking a little bit about movies in general and get into your some of your favorites, your underrated, overrated movies, but like just talk about the podcast really quick. We'll get the plug out of the way, the big plug, and then we'll plug at the end of the show. So there you go.
Yeah, so I'm in Movie Theater Time Machine, the podcast where we keep it real to real that celebrates Hollywood, old Hollywood and new, but really sticks to the movie theater experience and really just celebrates film when it was on film. And we really enjoy ourselves and have a good time. It's 4 nerdy people from New England get together to really just talk about it, have fun, and spread some good out into the world, man.
Yeah. How many people you have on the podcast? Because you're one of the hosts. You got a couple of guys.
It's me. It's my wife, Kaz, as well, and our friends, Dan and Joss. So it's 4 of us.
Okay. So you kind of get together, and, I've listened to some of the podcasts, and to be honest, I don't know a lot of these movies. It's like I'll see this random obscure movie from 1993 and I go, oh, okay, I've never heard of that. And I what I do is, because you guys have over like 300 episodes, right?
Yes, we do.
And I just keep scrolling. I'm like, okay, I found one I know. So it's like almost 1 in every 10 I recognize. And I know movies. I know a lot of this, but you guys really dig pretty deep here.
Well, we want to dig really deep because of the fact is movies are always really good because you always have differences with people, right? I might disagree with something with you, but then we sit down, we watch a flick, and we chill, and we talk about it and have a good time. And movies are always the common uniter. Mm-hmm. So when I started this, it was a random idea. I was on a podcast, a movie review show I was invited to, and it was a friend of mine who told me, he says, I bet you can't do a podcast like this. And I'm like, all right, challenge accepted, dude. Let's do it. And then I started doing it, and then he heard ours, and he quit his ship. And we just kept going.
You proved him wrong.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then we did. So with the podcast company we're involved with at that time, I think we are the only one that's still around.
Yeah, and it's an interesting concept in that, and I've talked to people who are from overseas, like immigrants or even people from Canada. And what they mention is Americans have this weird feeling of we're all like movie buffs. This isn't a thing in other countries. Like you don't see people in Poland are going to movies and will tell you, like, we have this random thing in America, and I do this too, where I'll watch a TV show and go, oh, that's the guy who was the waiter in that episode of Friends, but he's also in this show, That's like a strictly American thing.
It is, because that's our culture, is really with it's our closest thing to royalty that we have really is, we look at the screen and our movies are simply, and it's general movies in general, but movies are reflective of the culture.
Yes.
And you see something, and when you see an older movie or anything, you look at it and go, okay, could that be me? Or you may want to say, ooh, damn, I hope that is me at some point.
Well, let me ask about the movies in general, because with you being a film buff and everybody on the show following it, movies have taken kind of a back seat in the last couple of years. Every so often you'll have You'll have people go to the movie theaters out and take away COVID for example, because this started before then. And I was somebody that, I'm 34. So in the 90s and the 2000s, I'd go out and, you go on dates, you go with friends, you go to the movie theater.
Yep.
And I can't tell you the last time I went with friends outside of taking my now wife to a movie. And my wife and I have been together almost 6 years. We've been to one movie. That's just how it is. And I am, and mainly because I'm not a superhero guy. Star Wars the new Star Wars bores me. I'm too old for the cartoons, and you're not going to the movie theater to go see the rom-com featuring Julia Roberts and Matthew McConaughey. Those are now being streaming only. They're Hallmark Channel, they're whatever the case is. So basically, as Martin Scorsese said a few years ago, these movies are just, you're going to a carnival. These are amusement parks that you're going, when you go to the theater, you want the experience of going to IMAX so you can go see Thor and you can go see Iron Man, you see Captain America. But the days of cinema I don't know if they're over, but they've definitely changed. And in your opinion, a long way to get to this is, how can movies adapt to the amount of streaming that's going on now?
I think what has to happen is, we've had a long stream, about 20 something years of movies really starting to go the way of the superheroes. Like, it was when the first Spider-Man came about, I said, something is changing.
I remember. I remember that was 20 years ago. Yeah, like you said. I was about to get into high school, and I remember going there and watching the movie, because again, I'm not a superhero guy. I watched it, and I'm like, I don't like this, because it's the most predictable thing. I grew up with Spider-Man. Oh, great, there's Dr. Octopus. I hope Spider-Man saves the day. There was no twist and turn.
That's it, though. You just said it. Spider-Man saves the day. That's it. 20-ish years ago, we came off of 9/11. And just to give you a little background on me, I was a senior in high school when 9/11 happened. So it's like, okay, we're getting out into the world. Oh, shoot, we're going into war. Most of my graduating class signed up for the military. I couldn't, because of my own medical issues. I couldn't do it. But we all looked to something, and I think where we started seeing the world as some of this stuff is not that great. You had not to get too much into politics, but you had a president who did not win the popular vote. And as far as we learned, that wasn't supposed to happen. And you had another one who did. You had the world at war, and it's not considered World War III yet. But we look at it in escapism. We want to see that there are these superheroes around. You look towards the politicians, or you look towards leadership in the country, and like, it's not quite getting there. So like, you want to believe Spider-Man's there. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was the catalyst for all this, because people go, oh my God. And, you see all the American flags around, and, they had to redo it a lot. But that experience really just brought people in, because it became comfort. And the movies got more expensive. It became a lot more expensive. And I mean, I remember, I think it was like, we had to work, and in order to go on a day, we had to work like 4 or 5 hours, and then you had to work an entire day and a half in order to afford one ticket. So it's for some jobs, at least at that point. So it's like, oh gosh, now what are we gonna do? And as it got more expensive, and things like streaming isn't that bad. But streaming, you lose that communal experience.
Well, it's what we've talked about the last few years about Blockbuster. Was the reason people liked going to Blockbuster in the 90s, because not only for the comfort factor, it was the experience. You went there. Like, you can go to Hollywood Video, you can go to your local video store in town, but there was something about going to Blockbuster that it just seemed like there were spotlights above it. You buy popcorn. You're a kid, and you see the adult section. You go, is mom and dad looking around? It's all like part of that whole experience of going there. And then eventually, a couple of days later, you put it in the drop slot. We don't have those experiences anymore. And is that for the better? I mean, maybe in some ways, sure, maybe some ways not. But if you're a film buff, you just go, wow, I have a Regal Cinema that's right down the street from me. And I can't tell you the last time I'm like, wow, I can't wait to see that movie. In fact, earlier this year was the first time my wife and I ever went to go see a movie in the years we've been dating, and it was the new Jackass movie. So I'm kind of
That's good
contributing to
nostalgia,
it.
though. Yeah, I mean that's good nostalgia for me. You're right. I recently went to see the new Black Panther movie,
Mhm.
and the only reason I did was I got invited onto a podcast to review it, and that was the first time I had been there in a number of months. And the last time before that was Sonic 2, because my wife is a massive Sonic the Hedgehog fan, and that's an easy scoreable date night.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh,
That's
so let's go here. Let's do that. And then before that, it was just before COVID hit, was when we saw Sonic the Hedgehog 1 was released on Valentine's Day.
okay. Well, there you go.
So like boom, that was like a no-brainer. Called out of work that day, and we went to the movies.
And then right to the bedroom afterward.
And then right after, exactly, exactly. I mean, you're married too, so that's what you're hoping for, so it's like that's the game plan. But we had we had a good time for it, but we are losing that communal experience because of things like I mean what's going on in the world right now. I mean, communal things aren't really a big thing right now, and the independent circuits and independent movies aren't really a big thing, as much as Marvel movies and and DC universes.
They pay the bills, if you think about it. I mean, that's what
They
it
pay
is.
the
I mean,
bills. Yeah.
when we saw Jackass, I think the big reason why I wanted to go see it in the theater is I've seen all of them on streaming or DVD at the time when they came out. But there's something about being in an audience of anywhere between 20 and 100 people.
Yeah.
And when Steve-O gets his balls bit by like a python or whatever the case is, and the guttural reaction to the crowd where everybody it's kind of like being in a comedy club. That's why I do stand up, and I enjoy the craft of stand up, because you get that immediate reaction. And that's why I really wanted to go see it. But for the most part, I haven't been to a movie where I remember thinking back of some of the superhero things. I go, yeah, this is great as far as special effects, but it's the same story over and over and over again.
Exactly.
They're not leaving them up to interpretation. They're not leaving. It's just, like you said, about 20 years ago after 9/11, it is a carnival. It is comfort. It's, hey, I know what I'm getting myself into. I just want to be amused for about 2 hours. And then we go to dinner, or we go out to a bar, or go home. That's kind of what's going on. And we pick up the kids from the babysitter, and that's it. And I think even with music too, the reason we have so many of these services is, as opposed to where you couldn't wait for your favorite song to come on the radio, so you had to still wait. You say, why do I need to wait anywhere between 20 minutes to God only knows when? I'll just go on Spotify and find my song in 2 seconds.
And what you also have is there's because music does coincide with the way movies are released as well. I mean, I can remember not that long ago, one of my favorite bands was releasing an album. They would put something on social media, say our new album drops at 3 a.m. or drops at midnight on the California time. I'd set my alarm at 3 o'clock and download it on iTunes, just to have that entire album, warts and all.
Yeah.
But, I think the culture has changed a lot, and also movies and music, the technology is so democratized right now that there's so much. I mean, you and I are talking right now that 20 years ago, even back in the 90s too, I mean, we would have to know each other, be from the same city, same town, same group, and then get together to talk on a microphone.
Mm-hmm.
And even 25 years ago, now it's just this technology, this experience wasn't here even 3 years ago.
Yeah.
At all. I mean, the way things are rolling, the way that it's open, I think the way we're going to get back to a communal experience really is not going to be from like the next big, I know Marvel's in like phase 5 or whatever the hell it is, but where they're going towards the more minor superheroes, which is nice. But I think what's going to happen is you're going to have people come together, and I think you're going to see a swing the pendulum back to something similar to what I had, is when you had tape trades. Back in high school and junior highs, where people were like, hey, I just made this movie, because you can make all your movies on this,
True.
on the iPhone, and just say, hey, I made this movie, come over. And there was a movie that was released years ago, and I'm really racking my brain. I think it was called Be Kind, Rewind. And It was a nostalgia movie. It was with Jack Black and Mos Def. They had a little independent video store, one of the last in the area, and they were just selling movies and showing movies, and then it brought the whole town together. Ended kind of bizarrely, as I remember. It didn't last very long, but I think what you're going to see with movies is that swing back is going to be somebody's independent movie, much like music today. There's a lot of bands right now that are getting a much better audience than even when I was a kid.
And full autonomy too, because a lot of them own their record label. Well, and also what I found interesting in the last decade were the non-Marvel, the non-DC, non-Star Wars movies that ended up getting big and cult followings. And I think that's kind of where we're going with. And I remember, was it about 9 years ago, it was 2013, was when Sharknado, when that whole thing was going on. And even though it was already released and everything, they were just adding it. I don't know if it was Shark Week or whatever the case was, whatever the tie-in. And there was this communal feel on social media where everyone's like, everybody stop what you're doing.
Yeah.
You need to watch this. And then they replayed it on Sci-Fi or whatever. And then it was Sharknado 2. Now, I think they've had like 17 Sharknados already. I noticed that this week that we're recording this with the movie Cocaine Bear.
Yeah.
It's supposed to come out in February.
There are about 17 alterations of Sharknado. And if you go through our list of about a year ago, we did the 6 Sharknado movies. And I mean, those are ones that you're like, you're right. It's like, wait, shark, what? Like, and you describe it to somebody and you're just like, dude, hold on. There's a thing with sharks that got swept up in a tornado, and this guy with a chainsaw has to kill him. But he kills the sharks with a chainsaw. It's the guy from 90210.
And Tara Reid after post job.
Yeah. And Tara Reid with the job. Yeah.
You get Ian Ziering, Tara Reid, and then you have like all these random then they started throwing Michael Strahan in there, and I think Robert Hayes from Airplane. They had a quick airplane montage
there's
thing.
Way more, because in the 5th movie they just unleashed the cameos from that, and then the 6th movie where they're wrapping it up, and it's just like everybody comes back and shows themselves. Including I think one of my favorite bits, I believe it was the 5th movie, Tori Spelling appears.
No, of course.
Ian Ziering and Tara Reid go back in the past, and Tori Spelling appears as his mom. And they look at each other and they're like, hey, and she goes, did we go to high school together? And
so it's nostalgia is what it is.
Yeah,
you cash in on nostalgia.
They're plucking, but they know that it's a terrible movie. They know that they're bad and they're just leaning into it. And then the 6th movie, you have there's the really famous scientist who's the
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, thank you. Yeah, who plays Merlin. And it's very obvious he's not even in the room. He's not even trying to do that. He's reading off of a script. Yeah. He's in front of a green screen and with a wizard suit that I think was his. And you're just like, okay, he's happy to be there. And it's just, no one gives a shit. It's just those movies, you're right, I think are what's going to turn the pendulum back.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have those Neil Breen movies, Fateful Findings, and others like that, and then Tommy Wiseau's The Room.
Yeah. And then also the other thing is that there are certain directors people want to go see, like Scorsese when The Irishman came out a couple of years ago, where, hey, we're going to have it in the movie theaters for a couple of weeks, then we're going to put it on Netflix. Tarantino's another big one where when he has it, it's an event.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I noticed in the last 10 years, because I wanted to get really, I would always watch the Oscars. Now I watch and I'm like, I haven't seen any of these movies. I don't know half of these actresses.
Yeah.
And I think things changed drastically between with the voters and with the people. And wasn't it about 10 years ago that there was that movie called The Artist?
Yep.
Which was a black and white silent film, and it won Best Picture. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know one person who has seen this movie. Well, I know one person who's seen this movie, but at the time, I just remember hearing all of this hype, and I'm thinking, I none of my friends, no one in my social circle, and I know a lot of people who like movies, knew any of this. And then you start noticing that what the critics chose was way different from what the public wanted. And then there was that public outcry where they said, why don't we have a separate category for most popular movie that people really like? We'll give that an Oscar. And then whatever the critics decide, because there have been some upsets over time, but I just noticed that in the last decade where it just seemed the Academy said, no, we're only going to showcase the movies we want and the people we want, as opposed to what the people actually want.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. And also with the Oscars and a lot of those award shows, I mean, they're chosen by a lot of people who are in the Screen Actors Guild. You know, I know ballots are sent out, they're taken back, and Accenture and a couple of accounting firms actually tally all those and then get that together. You know, that is one of those that's really, it's really super dicey. And also I think that's the way it's, I mean, that's the way it's always been. But years back, you know, when we were in the monoculture of, you know, when you had the news at 6 and 4, you know, 3, maybe 4 channels on your TV, you didn't have a lot, you didn't know a lot that was going on. So if whatever picture won, you know, chances are sometimes they didn't see it either. You know, they didn't know what was going on, or, you know, like, okay, that one won, and then it drove people back into it. But the people who had the money, you know, to go out and look at these indie culture stuff, or, you know, not necessarily indie culture, but look at these movies that might have been out there every once in a while or something and go, oh, okay, that works. Like the People's Choice Awards, those are ones that are tallied up a little differently. And I don't know how exactly they're all together, but those are ones that come together through voting and through you know, I know lately, I know they're done through some websites as I understand it, but you know, People's Choice Awards were used to, they used to be done through People magazine.
Okay.
Back in the 80s, and you know, that was tabulated a little differently. But then again, those were for people who might have been much different and you know, from a ways back. But cable TV kind of changed that as well, because that all streamed out live and people were able to call in numbers and vote and stuff. But nowadays, I think, you know, I personally do not care for award shows at all. You know, hey, that person's wearing a nice dress and won an award for a movie I didn't care about either. You know, or I didn't know what happened, but it's the opinion of people in the room that this is the best movie.
Yeah, and then there was a lot of strange categories, and then you wait for the performances or who's ever hosting, and you know, or who's ever going to slap one of the presenters.
Right. Yeah, and that, you know, made people talk more about, you know, was that the Oscars, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened. Like, I think that was more chatter about the Oscars, you know, than the
actual ceremony,
than the actual thing. But you know, for many years, like nobody really gave a damn. Like, oh yeah, the Oscars were on last night. And I think, you know, for our show, I mean, we did we picked random years and we did best Oscar of, you know, some years for a long time, and then tried to figure out, you know, if we could see if this movie still holds up. But we only did that once, I think, in our second year or our first year. Honestly, I can't remember. And since then, even I don't give a damn. You know, I run a nostalgic movie podcast.
Yeah.
myself, so I'm like,
Well, it was wasn't it? I remember it was well, not remember, I wasn't alive yet, but it was 1975, I think. Bob Hope. I think it was the last time Bob Hope ever hosted the Oscars, and he
right.
opened with the great joke where he said, "Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Academy Awards, or as what it's known in my house, Passover," which is funny, dumb Bob Hope joke.
Yeah.
But with you doing a podcast, and I notice you go back in time with a lot of these
Yep.
movies in these years,
Yeah.
is that there are still movies being made right now, a lot of them very lower budget and
Yeah.
lower and even lower box office returns. And so I think a lot of these concepts for movies have gone from being, we'll do a movie, and if it's popular, we'll do a sequel, to instead of a movie, how about we take it over to Netflix or Amazon, and they'll give us somewhere between 4 and 12 episodes. So therefore, you take what the concept of what a normal movie would be, and you stretch it out into a season of a TV show.
Yeah.
And I think that's got to be tough for people who enjoy the feeling of cinema. And you're going, okay, so now I'm going to watch, instead of a 2-hour movie, I'm now watching an entire weekend that takes up of one concept.
Yeah.
So and a lot of those, if you notice, they don't last very long. They're like maybe a couple of seasons with the Netflix show. There's certain ones that have stayed the test of time. Like I think even Stranger Things had to refresh themselves, because otherwise I thought the first season was really good, but I would have also thought Stranger Things would have come out 15, 20 years earlier in a movie as opposed to a TV series.
I totally agree with you. And actually, we did that last weekend, where we watched the show Wednesday.
Okay, yeah.
And I thought the exact same thing. And I'm like, oh, and even myself, where I watched the first episode, I'm like, this, and not knowing at first, my thought was, this feels like a Tim Burton movie.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Then I realized, but it is directed by Tim Burton. So I'm like, okay, yeah, that is exactly what they're doing. But I think as a business standpoint, that's kind of the way they're going, because it's guaranteed that they're going to make money regardless. Because Netflix has set itself up so that way they, people pay the monthly fee, and it's kind of like the way the BBC is. We're going to do this, and you might not watch Netflix for months on end, but you're still going to get the money because it's all paid by credit card, and it's just enough. It's like it's kind of like the way Planet Fitness works. It's like, okay, $10 a month. Are you going to notice $10 on your credit card? Probably not. Are you going to notice 13, 14, 15? Not so much. So, I mean, if they put their stuff on Netflix, it's like, okay, they guarantee to get a paycheck, and they're probably going to make their whatever money they put into it back, and then whatever else is gravy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I get that. And I mean, you're right, though. I mean, that's a good point. I think about it because we watched Wednesday, and I'm like, this is a movie. This is a movie. The 8 episodes, 20 to 30 minutes each one. It was about 3 hours or so. Yeah, it's a Tim Burton movie.
And what happens with a lot of those is the first couple episodes are they get you. Then like episode 4, 5, they're like, that's just filler. They're just throwing something together, and then the crescendo towards the end of
kind of
that cliffhanger. So that's kind of like what a movie is. That there are those websites. I remember, I think it's called RunP. And it's a website where they tell you, hey, we reviewed these movies, and if you're at the movie or if you're at home, you got to take a piss.
Yeah.
You just walk out in the room. You're like, you're good for about 2 minutes. You're not missing any storyline.
I have the app for that still.
I love that back in the day.
There is an app for it. You go and you look at it. It says, when so-and-so says this, okay, it's time to go. You got 20 minutes. And it said that because I did that where I was on a podcast recently and used the app for the Weird Al Yankovic story,
which I thought was really funny.
It was funny, but there's a point where I'm not going to spoil any of it, but there's a point where it grinded to a halt, in my opinion.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. It was like, it was one of those where I'm like, okay, all right, so
Yeah.
what time are we at here? Well, we're
Right
wrapping up.
to a
We're wrapping
halt.
up towards a normal
Yeah.
regulation movie.
Yeah, and I'm checking, how much time do I have left? And then it's like, that's the point where it's like, okay, right here, when Daniel Radcliffe says this is the best 6 hours of my life, you have 15 minutes to walk away. And I'm like, wow, all right. And even they got the band left on Roku, where like you could pause and walk away now, that's the difference.
So let's talk a couple of movies of we could have every conversation. I'd love to have you back to talk about some of the best movies. I want to talk about worst movies, because there's a communal feeling with a bad movie.
Yep.
When you go there and you just kind of see people squirm, and I think nowadays when you start to see phone face, when you see the ghost face of everybody looking at their phone, you go, yeah, these are people that are just they're trying to get their money's worth, but this movie is just terrible. And the last movie I saw before COVID was a couple years before COVID, which was Gotti, the awful John Travolta movie where and it was him doing, so Travolta's wearing this John Gotti wig. The movie opens with him as John Gotti, or it's like, oh, I'm John Gotti, and it's my city here. And it's basically what it is it's a B movie with John Travolta. You don't recognize anything. It's supposed to be taking place in the 80s, yet Pitbull scored the movie and has his music in the movie. I'm like, Pitbull was born in the 80s, I believe.
Yeah. And I call that the movie that was conceived in a boardroom. This is a boardroom movie. Okay, who are we gonna do? Like, there was an episode of South Park that I think shows this concept tremendously. And you speak like John Gotti, I think of like, when we were growing up, you had Adam Sandler.
Yes.
And Adam Sandler was one that was either hit or miss. And for the most part in the 90s, he was pretty damn funny. Like, I remember when Billy Madison came out and I saw that in the theater. I was way too young to see it, but I had a cool sister. So, like, hey, come here. And I was like, okay, fine. Here. That's fine.
Like, oh, okay, yeah, that's
magazine day, like
I'm 7, 8 years old at that time. It's like, all right, no, that's amusing for the time being.
Yeah, and you see that, but like Adam Sandler, like there's the South Park episode where Cartman pretends to be a robot and he gets drafted into a boardroom of movie executives and he's pitching ideas and they turn them all to Adam Sandler movies. He's like, how about this guy who is a really cool guy and he gets really drunk and falls in love with a girl or something and has to figure out his life or something. Like, perfect, we can call it Punch Drunk Love again. It's just like, and you look at that, like John Gotti, that one was conceived in a boardroom where it's like, what is really good right now when writing this? Oh, John Gotti was caught. Ooh, we got to write a biopic on him. Who's a great actor? John Travolta hasn't had a lot of work. Yeah, the charts say that he's really good. Let's get him in here. Okay, fine. And, they do, oh, this statistically should work. Who gives a fuck?
I have to say about John Travolta, because they keep talking about, well, he was so big in the 70s, Mr. Cocktail, and, Saturday Night Fever. And they're like, he dropped off, but then his real big comeback was Pulp Fiction. And I'm like, he was the worst part of Pulp Fiction. He was the weakest part.
Yeah, he was just the straight man. But John Travolta is one guy who he cannot lead, but he's an ensemble actor.
But he wants to lead. That's his problem, is that he can't accept the fact that he's an ensemble guy.
Yeah, but he can lead, but he has to have strong people around him.
Mm-hmm.
Pulp Fiction, for example, he was partnered with Samuel L. Jackson. Primo movie all around, but every scene he's in there, where he looks and goes, hey, Vincent, what's in the briefcase? And John Travolta's not saying a word. His best acting, by the way.
Correct.
And then you get that Samuel L. Jackson monologue, about that. So, I mean, he has to have strong people around him in order to elevate him. And, the best scene out of the movie, Bruce Willis sees him and kills him. in my own opinion, it's like, okay, fine. Vincent's dead.
I think the best scene in Pulp Fiction is when you had Harvey Keitel in there as Winston Wolfe, and he does, and when Travolta does the "Please will be nice," it's like, and which I think the acting by Travolta is terrible there, but the acting by Harvey Keitel is like pretty pleased with sugar on top. Clean the fucking car. Yeah, it does that, and it's like that's great acting right there. Harvey Keitel is amazing. Another one where you mentioned about Adam Sandler was another movie that I saw in the theater, and I wish I hadn't, because this was I think I was going to high school and I wanted to be with my friends, but my brother is a few years younger than me, and my mom said you need to go with your brother, and we're going to a movie, and I had to take him to a movie. I couldn't drive yet, so my mom drove us. And this is 20 years ago, and my brother, because he saw the constant, and you know what I'm talking about when I say this, Dana Carvey, Master of Disguise.
Oh, God.
He wanted to see it solely because he dressed as that turtle character. And because I think my brother was about 10, 11 years old and was amused by him in this turtle outfit. So we had to go see Master of Disguise, which was a PG movie. It's considered one of the worst movies of all time. I believe Dana Carvey has come out and said it essentially ruined my career, that movie. And I just remember at 14, I'm not a film buff at 14, and I knew it was shit. And at 34, if I went to go, God forbid I found it somewhere and watched it, I'm probably going to still think it's shit. So have you seen that movie?
Yes, I have.
Have you reviewed that? I haven't seen that.
No.
Do you want to, or would that be the last episode?
No,
would that be one where you're like, look, I can't do this podcast anymore. I quit. This movie's so bad. It's forcing me.
No, because we had one movie that it almost imploded the show. There was a movie called Existo.
Okay.
And we were reviewing it because it was the 20th anniversary of Jim Varney's death. They played in the Ernest movies.
Oh, yeah.
Loved them as a kid. Hindsight, pretty bad. But we had to fund.
I want to talk about that next, but go ahead, keep going.
No problem. We had that, and we watched Existo, which was the second to last movie he ever did, and everybody was on cocaine, and it's obvious everybody was on cocaine in this movie. And we went to the studio, and we saw our other co-host, and they all just slung arrows at me. About that, because I picked the movie to watch, and they were like, what the hell? But it's still a bonding movie. Because when you talk about bad movies itself, I think it's like the most American thing in the world for us. And I say this as a proud American. If you smell something bad, people have got to smell it. Oh my God, this smells terrible. Here, smell this.
Of course.
Oh my God, this is awful. Here, smell this. Oh my God, did you do that? Or you have like a gym bag that you kind of forgot about for a little while? Oh my God, hey Larry, come on over here. It's the same concept of like, let me show you something terrible. Like how, Rocky Horror Picture Show, that's okay.
But camp, people like camp, and they're attracted to camp in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, when you mentioned about the Ernest movies, is that I actually dressed up as Jim Varney or Ernest for Halloween this past year.
Really?
And I've been to his gravesite. I actually know his nephew, who actually wrote a book. It's kind of fascinating.
He runs a Twitter page on him too. Right?
Jim Varney book, and Justin Lloyd, his name is. And
right. Yeah.
I really like Jim Varney is a typical character actor.
Right.
But character actors don't necessarily lead things. So you essentially, he was Flo before Flo from the Progressive commercials.
Exactly.
He was the guy that in the 80s, he pitched everything. And that was part of the goal, because he was a failed stand-up comedian. He would have bit parts on like the Johnny Cash show and God only knows what in the 70s. He returns back towards Tennessee and Kentucky, ends up doing these commercials, and they start putting him in movies. But that was the one thing when you and I were growing up in the 90s, that direct to DVD or direct to VHS movies were very popular. Nowadays they're just, they're in the ash bin of YouTube somewhere,
Yeah.
but at one time you were going like, hey, I kind of like this series, and you knew it wasn't great. You knew these weren't, you knew Mike, for example, Mike Myers. You knew Mike Myers was never going to win an Academy Award, but you liked him. So
Yeah.
you were drawn
Yeah.
to it, that it wasn't a bad thing to be doing comedy. And I thought that was like that with Jim Varney was,
Yeah.
you knew Jim Varney was not going to thank the Academy for his best acting award, but
Yeah.
you liked it. It was
Yeah.
fun, and again, a communal experience.
Yeah. I think Jim Varney himself, do you know the story of how the Ernest character went national?
Yes.
Yeah.
But do you go ahead and tell it?
Yeah, how he was in Florida and it was at a NASCAR event, and Michael Eisner showed up, said hi, and then didn't really get a lot of applause from the crowd, and then Jim Varney showed up as Ernest, and the crowd went nuts. And then Michael,
they got to deal with
you
touchdown.
got to figure out what to do with this guy. Like, he has to be on board. Like, he was more popular at that time than Mickey Mouse, so like he had to roll and had to get through it. But you're right. I mean, Jim Varney, like, I think he is like the luckiest guy in show business, period. I mean, he had a lot that he could have just, gone by the wayside and been a weird guy that we saw in commercials, Flow from Progressive. Like, he could have done that and then been forgotten about, especially before the internet. And then when he started to go down, he died.
Yeah, that's true. Well, then he wanted to do some other acting, and he ended up being Jed Clampett in the Beverly Hillbillies movie, which was awful.
Fantastic.
Well, I thought
movie.
his part was just, it was a little bit of a stretch, but I liked the casting. I just thought the movie was terrible.
Oh, the movie's not great. The movie itself and the story is not that phenomenal. Like, I grew up with my dad watching the Beverly Hillbillies, and I just wanted to hang out with my dad, so I kind of got the gist of it. But like, that fish out of water story is the same thing over and over again. And he didn't have a lot, but yeah, he did stretch, and he was kind of slowing down a bit. I think his lung cancer, like, he might have just got the notice that he got lung cancer at that time or not, but you could tell his voice was getting a little raspy.
Yeah, it was a little bit raspier. Yeah. Well, I mean, you hear it when he's is the Slinky Dog in Toy Story. It's when a little bit raspier than where he was a couple of years earlier.
Yeah, I was way beyond that point, but I was like, yeah, man, how you doing there? And it's different, but it was just fun because you knew that guy and you saw something, and then when it came out again, you saw it again. And I remember buying his VHS in the flea markets.
Yeah.
A lot. You didn't see it there, but it's like, Ernest goes to camp. Okay, where's Ernest going next?
Slam dunk Ernest.
Oh God. Oh, that one was painful.
Oh, they all have their moments of cringe, but the early ones, at least the ones that were a little bit more higher budget.
Yeah.
Speaking of Beverly Hillbillies, because Lily Tomlin played Miss Hathaway. I thought it was great casting. Cloris Leachman as Granny.
Yeah.
That leads me to my next thing I wanted to ask you about, was the nostalgia movies, where you started seeing because I believe right after that the Flintstones movie came out.
Yes.
And it was one where I watched it maybe a year ago, and you can even tell that it was so bad that Rick Moranis, who I love SCTV, I love Rick Moranis and what he's able to do, but you can even tell he just doesn't care. He's just doing this bad Barney Rubble, like, hey, Fred. And John Goodman is coming off of a lot of bad movies as Babe Ruth and a couple others. And Rosie O'Donnell only got the job as Betty Rubble because she could do the Betty Rubble laugh. That was the giggle. The movie was terrible, but then we started seeing this wave of, let's do a Munsters movie. Let's do a live action Yogi Bear movie. Let's do this movie. And in my opinion, as somebody who likes a lot of the old, Looney Tunes, I thought I didn't like Space Jam either. I thought Space Jam was I liked seeing the characters, and I guess as a kid, I liked Michael Jordan and I liked Bugs Bunny, but as I've gotten older, I hate that movie.
It's super overrated. I agree with you there. It's super, super overrated, but
And I think it hurts the characters, the legacy of the characters, in my opinion.
It does, because that again goes to a boardroom decision. You know, Michael Jordan, probably the best athlete of the 90s, and there could be arguments on that, but I would say he really, he put basketball on, in the pop culture lexicon. And we all knew Chicago Bulls, even if we didn't play. But I think it's like, okay, we have Michael Jordan, and we have the money to advertise. We have people who have the money right now are wanting to get their kids in there, and we're going to release that in the middle of the summer, and then everybody's going to go there. And you see that starting again now. Maybe it's the way it's always been, but now I'm paying attention to it more, where you see it, because what happens now, Disney is doing the exact same thing. What they're doing is they're taking the properties, remaking them, make a live action Lion King or live action Aladdin, which horrible, but they're
cash grabs.
Yeah, they're cash grabs, because the parents are going to remember the nostalgia.
Correct.
And they're going to take their kids to go see it, because maybe the bills are way too high, and we're going to shut the AC off in the house, and we're going to go to a nice air conditioned movie theater for a few hours and keep the kids entertained. We're gonna do that. But what I was always interested in seeing is how we don't have this much now, but how the DVDs go after that, because DVD wise, boom, it drops right down again. But Disney doesn't care, because it grabbed all the money it could in the theater and then went away. And the streaming wise, what the streaming numbers look like, nobody was really paying attention to that. I don't know how much they did over COVID, but they did that also with the oh my god, it was the Frozen.
Yes.
With Frozen and things. But I think, we've had that, back to like Space Jam and other things. It did ruin it, because a lot of people, I grew up watching Looney Tunes, myself, because they were always on Saturday morning, and then there's many different things that killed the Saturday morning cartoons. But I think it brought it back down. I can't remember the last time I did it or watched a stream of Looney Tunes on YouTube or something, or I can't remember the last time I did that myself.
Yeah, and I've seen them. I've seen the new Looney Tunes, and there's no edge to it. I'm not saying that there were some edgy things, at least by today's standards and everything. I like passing on a legacy. It's just don't ruin the legacy in the process.
Yeah,
that's just how I feel.
That's also one of the reasons why we do what we do in Movie Theater Time Machine. We do celebrate the ones that are kind of obscure.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. And I will be the first to say it. Maybe 10% of our movies are ones that people understand or people have seen.
Yeah, like I was listening to the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest one you guys had.
Yeah, and thank you. And thank you for listening too, by the way. We really appreciate it. But like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and then if we did another Jack Nicholson movie, maybe we did The Shining the year ago. I think it was around Halloween. And then, we might do The Postman Always Rings Twice. One that somebody did not understand or, hasn't understand. But we also did the original Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, the original Roger Corman one from 1960 with a quick cameo of Jack Nicholson as the patient.
Which is one of Jack Nicholson's first roles, and I believe he was 19 in that one.
Yeah, he was very young, but he's very recognizable as Jack Nicholson.
You see it as soon as it's like, oh dear, it's here. And it's like, okay, that's like a little bit of a Joker from the 80s comes out. Just a smidge, you can kind of see it. But it's just right there, and it's Jack, but it's like you sit through this 70-minute movie that's not too great just to see 2 minutes of Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's very. It's, again, you want to talk about campy, but that was Roger Corman, and he's
Yeah.
still alive, by the way. Which no,
Really?
yeah, he's 96. Which of course, as I say that,
Get the hell out of here.
I think I'm gonna kill him because I've had this bad luck where I mentioned like, hey, so and so's still alive, and it's like I just talked about him last week on a podcast. So
Yeah.
as
We've done that too. Yeah.
so as we wrap up the podcast, I'm gonna put you on the spot here,
Go
and
for it, man.
I want to ask you about your favorite movie that is not, I guess, either didn't do well at the box office or the critics panned it. Or what's the most, and also at the same time, what is the most overrated movie that everybody talks about? You have to see this. This is universally great. And you just think, not good, not for me.
Okay. All right. I can give you those right away.
Okay.
One of those. So greatest one that got panned absolutely is the movie Waiting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, fantastic movie. I worked in a lot of restaurants, dude. Like, and I think that's the one movie that got restaurant life right.
Like you don't want to go to a restaurant after you watch Waiting.
No. And if you go to a restaurant, you treat the wait staff extremely well.
I've done that because of that movie. Yeah, you're right.
Very, very well. And you see the cook say hi, but everybody knows a Louis Guzman. That type
Dane
of
Cook.
Dane Cook, who was there because Dane Cook. But everybody knows a Ryan Reynolds. Everybody knows a Justin Long. For that. I mean, that movie I think is just nostalgic gold. And it got it right. I remember training, doing my first day at a restaurant, and I was the John Francis Daly. Just sitting there having nothing to say and then exploding at the end. And it's not PC, but damn, it's funny. Like, it's just one of those, you're like, yeah, I've done that. And it brings back together because anyone who worked in a restaurant can understand it.
Yeah.
I think a movie that everybody loves that is absolute crap is The Hangover.
You took mine. That was mine.
Yeah, is just awful. And
it spawned two extra sequels.
Yeah.
I saw it in the theater and I went in with an open mind because as far as comedy goes, I'm kind of I'm a little more of a snob than I guess most people. And I remember going to see The Hangover. It came out in 2009. And I had a coworker said, it's the funniest movie I've ever seen. Everyone was on the floor laughing in the audience. And I'm like, all right. So it took my girlfriend at the time and we went to go see it. And I stared at the screen. I'm watching everybody like piss themselves. I'm like, that's not funny. It's like, he's naked. He's doing a stereotypical Asian impression. And okay, hey, we got drunk. I can't remember. Look, here's Mike Tyson. He punches people, and here's a tiger. And I can't believe what happened. And I'm just like, that's it. This is the most overrated movie especially overrated comedy movie because you could talk about Avatar, you could talk Titanic, all these big budget movies, but I thought as far as comedy goes, I thought it really almost helped kill the movies.
Yeah, it was total crap. A plot that was so predictable. And do you mind if I spoil it for people who haven't seen it?
I think everyone's. I think if you're not going to spoil it, I think you can go on cable right now, and it's probably on TBS.
Yeah,
listen to this.
Good point. Good point. But their friend is drunk, and they had a bachelor party. They lost their friend. They got to go around Vegas to find their friend. He's on the fucking roof. He's on the roof because I saw that they woke up. I'm like, he's on the roof. He's on the roof. He's on the roof. I know where Dougie is. Hey, he's on the roof. Hey, he's on the roof. There he is. Like, he's on the roof. They got the chips. They got money. Okay, you're just kind of like there have been experiences in the movie theater that have turned bad movies good. Where you're watching some movie and just the way people are bickering about it, and you're like we watched with Superman, and people started heckling it, and they were funnier than the movie.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, okay, that's good. And then movies that were already great that got better based on that. And I share like a quick story, like when we saw Kill Bill.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've seen Kill Bill 2?
I didn't see the second one. I just saw the first one.
Okay, so Kill Bill 2, there is a very iconic scene where Uma Thurman crawls out of a grave and they do the Carrie tribute. You know, where the hand goes through out of the soil and it's like, ooh, you know. Now I tell you, for a while, we reviewed this a few months back, and I could not remember 10 minutes after that scene when I saw it originally. Because she pops her hand out of the grave, climbs out, and the screen goes black for a second. And there's a woman who is a few seats over, and all I hear is, ooh, she gonna get him. And I'm losing it for a while. Like I do not remember 10 minutes of the movie because I'm just losing it from that. The same woman is in the movies when we saw Hancock years later.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And she's like, yeah, Will's great. And I'm laughing because she's so damn funny. And the movie is awful, but I'm like, how the hell? Like, she's funnier than what they're trying to write. You know, that was the experience that we missed.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll give mine quick one because I actually got an opportunity to tell him about it. Was as far as underrated movies that were pretty panned, and it was Zach and Miri Make a Porno.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny, and I had an opportunity to talk to Kevin Smith a few years ago, and I said, first of all, I'm like, I think this is because I was in LA. It was at the Hollywood Improv, and he was doing something there, and I had a question, and we're talking for a while. I got a picture with him. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I said, first of all, I got to say that I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I thought, and you thought it killed Seth Rogen's career, but I thought Zach and Miri Make a Porno was a really funny, underrated movie. And he's like, oh, thank you, I really appreciate that and stuff. So that's kind of one of those. My wife is from the Pittsburgh area, so and that's where it was filmed, and so we go back in time, and that's one of those the COVID movies, the comfort movies that we put on it would come on like every once in a while on HBO, and we're like, all right, let's watch this. We'll watch Zach and Miri again. But I always really enjoyed that one. But it's so and that was the other thing, was that the Clerks and all the Kevin Smith movies. You want to talk about somebody brought up a very good point, that the higher the budget, the worse movie that Kevin Smith did.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree.
Although, have you seen Clerks 3?
Not yet.
You've seen Clerks 2?
Yes.
You've obviously seen the first one.
Yes.
I'm going to say, I'm not going to spoil anything because I cannot spoil this movie. Clerks 3 way exceeded my expectation. Really? I saw Jay and Silent Bob reboot. That sucks. You can ignore that if anyone ever wants to see that. I saw it too.
Yeah, I didn't like it. Yeah.
Clerks 3 was unbelievably good compared to Clerks 2. That's all I'm going to say. No spoilers, but I'm telling you, if you have nothing to do this weekend, I would watch it.
Okay.
It was really good.
Okay.
And actually I got a chance back to meet Jeff Anderson and Jeff O'Halloran at a Comic-Con, and they were out promoting the movie. They were trying to get it out there. And I've been to the Quick Stop. So I had the Quick Stop t-shirt, and Brian O'Halloran was like, oh yeah, you've been to the store. That's the official t-shirt. So it was really cool. I had a great conversation with them. But yeah, no, please go see Clerks 3. If you enjoyed the first one, if you sat through the second one and had its moments, the third one wraps things up, and it's really, really good.
Okay. I'm sold, man. I'm sold.
Well, and speaking of movies, you do a podcast again. What's the plug, and where can we find it, and any other pertinent information we can get out there for you?
Yeah, so Movie Theater Time Machine, you can see it anywhere where there's a podcast. You can pick it up. We're on almost every single place where you could find it. So, I mean, Spotify, iTunes, yada, yada, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all the majors and the minors. So definitely, if you want to reach out to us, the best way is Movie Theater Time Machine at gmail.com or on our Facebook page. We are launching movietheatertimemachine.com soon. although it's a slow work in progress. But and if you listen to our shows and listen to the fantasy casting segment, and you have a better idea for fantasy casting, we want to know about that. What actors would you replace? Because then, when we do get that, we talk about it on the next episode to see how that would go.
All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, yeah, no, it's great talking to you, Nick, and Nick Tabor. It's this is cool. We'll have to do this again. We'll have to talk about some of the best movies. Maybe I'll have you back on around Oscar time, and we could talk about movies that I haven't seen yet.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, me neither. Yeah, dude.
Absolutely. Nick Tabor from the movie theater podcast, and I appreciate it. Thanks again for coming on, and it's a good time.
All right.